Hola, welcome back to Ascending with Ashley. I'm Ashley. This is a collective convo, and we're gonna talk about whiteness. I think it's a problem right now that we need to talk about. So obviously, we are living within white supremacy. Okay, we always have been, but right now it's a little bit on this rampant pickup because of the Cheeto Man. I mean, not just because of him, but his position gives a green flag for a lot of horrible people to do a lot of horrible things, and they are using the administration and municipality codes to do so. This is more than just the United States. This is a large global thing that's happening. White supremacists, neo-Nazis, Nazis, like the OG ones, and Zionists are ironically all supremacists within, like right now, going balls to the walls, as we know, okay? As a white woman, anti-racist work and decolonizing from my own internalized white supremacy is a constant process. I think that even though I'm very aware of it, there's still such thing as microaggressions that are really deeply embedded in us because of things that we've heard from our family, TV, media, things like that. I think within that too, there's these other layers of like xenophobia, Islamophobia, homophobia, right? All of those exist as tools and tactics for control within supremacy, right? Does that make sense? Xenophobia, the fear, dislike, or hatred of strangers or foreigners or anything perceived as foreign or different, okay? Islamophobia is the fear, phobia of folks who practice Islam, the Muslim faith, okay? Muslim folks. Homophobia is the fear of gay folks, or anything not heteronormative or cis or straight, okay? And those, like I said, are tactics, as is whiteness, to uphold supremacy, right? And those aren't just the only three. Misogyny is another, to hold up patriarch, okay? So whenever you're experiencing, or like what we're experiencing right now with these supremacist ideals getting into power, so they're making their own phobias and fears. They're using these tactics of xenophobia, misogyny, Islamophobia, homophobia, all of those phobias, right? They're very real for people who practice supremacy. And within this, I'm just setting the stage. I'm not saying everyone who's white is a supremacist, which is why I wanted to come on here, because for those of you who are dedicating yourselves to the movement, that's something that a lot of people say. A lot of people within the movement have trauma just the same way we have embedded supremacy as white folks or people of privilege, whatever overlap or intersect you're within. The opposite coin of that, right, the other side of that, is folks who are oppressed, who have generational trauma of colonials, right? So those of us who have colonial lineage, what our ancestors did to people whose now our ancestors are of those folks, are highly skeptical of people with white skin, with good reason. But within the movement, it's very hard for sometimes folks to look past that. And that's the thing that I want to talk about when I'm talking about whiteness. We've already talked about proximity to whiteness within this societal context, and how, a lot of people who are not white have a proximity to whiteness that keeps them safe, right? Why would brown folks work for border patrol? Why would black folks become police? It's really hard for me not to say pigs, if you notice. Why would people go into the military? Things like this are legit questions, but what you need to understand at a societal level is that the supremacists have set up these systems to work to their benefit. Again, using these phobias and other things as tactics. Poverty is the utmost tactic, right? So a lot of people who are low income, or families who live below the poverty line, because of systemic oppression, because the people who are of colonial lineage have always had that power, that money, that backing, and have never rightfully shared that as they should have since the times of civil rights and things like that. So, for instance, Kendrick Lamar talked about this at his Super Bowl show, but I think it went over a lot of people's heads. Well, technically, it was what Samuel L. Jackson. The 40 acres and a mule. When Abraham Lincoln signed the proclamation, what was it? When he freed enslaved folks, which we're going to be celebrating with Juneteenth, and by we, I mean not us. Black folks are going to be celebrating Juneteenth coming up this month, okay? Juneteenth was when word got to the last plantations in Texas and let them know that they were free. But it took a lot longer after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. So anyway, when he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, there was a clause that said that people who were enslaved were going to be gifted 40 acres and a mule. That was never done. That was never carried out. All that to say is that that would have shifted drastically the power struggles. That would have really lasted, that would have really served to give long-lasting liberation, right? But no, that's not what happened. Word wasn't even given to people, right? Like I said, it took a couple years after that was signed for people in Texas, enslaved folks in Texas, to even know that it was done. That's what Juneteenth is the acknowledgement of, the end of chattel slavery. Anyway, when we talk about whiteness within the movement, a lot of people are going to question you if you are going to be participating on the ground, and I want you to be prepared for it and also earn that space. When I was doing frontline work in LA, I was not quite there yet. I had to do a fuck ton of decolonizing. I was very problematic. I was very self-centered, and a lot of white folks, because of the way we've lived within white supremacy, we're used to our voices being heard. We're used to centering our ideas. We are used to having that systemic privilege of being heard, taken seriously, seen, which is something that a lot of brown and black folks who have lineage that has not experienced that don't have, which is why when you join in certain movements for human rights, you follow the leader. You don't become the leader. And I think it's important to allow your ego to do this, which is why we talk about ego deaths, right? I do a lot of this for self-improvement and collective liberation, but I think one of the things that we're talking about right now that I haven't really spoken on is how to bridge those two, right? Especially as white folks. So when we enter into movement spaces, when we dedicate ourselves to knowing better, doing our own healing work so that we aren't our colonial lineage, we don't perpetrate the same cycles as our ancestors, especially when it comes to oppression, right? And I don't think a lot of society is there. Like, I feel like who I'm talking to is probably, like, I want to say less than 3% of the entire population of the planet. Because the reason I say this is because capitalism, again, the tactic of upholding oppression and keeping people at each other. Do my hands look weird because I'm like leaning forward? Capitalism. We've talked about this, and I had that drawing. I don't know where it went. It's over here somewhere. But I had a triangle of the hierarchy of the country and how it keeps people at each other. Now, again, this is very organized. So for those of you who are just coming into consciousness about how horrible this system actually is, it's important to note that it was done by design and has been this way for hundreds of years. But that doesn't mean that it needs to stay. I'm going to use a marker because this is going to be too... Hang on, let me draw this for you again quick. Where's my marker? What's up, Nova? Nova was outside. Where are my markers? Hold on, friends. I really don't want to use my fabric marker. I don't think this is a very good one, but yeah, okay. Why do I even still have this? It's trash. Trash. I don't have a good marker. I have a fuck ton of markers over here. Hang on. I just gotta find the right one, friends. Are you guys getting stressed and annoyed? Sorry. We'll use blue, because blue lives are not a thing. Okay. Wow, why do all my markers suck? Okay. So, we're talking about oppressive systems and the way that people exist within them. Okay? Alright, stars and money signs equal elite. And there's varying levels of elite, right? There's billionaires, there's millionaires. Okay, there's a big difference between a billionaire and a millionaire. Because, like, a billion is what, like 100 million? I don't know. Anyway, each of these boxes represent, like, teacher, doctor, race, gender, sexuality. Different versions of diversity within our system. These are the ways they keep us at each other. And the reason that I think that who I'm talking to, if you're here, is a very low percentage is because teachers have been indoctrinated into policing students. Doctors have been indoctrinated into policing patients. Sexuality, there's a lot of differences within that. Either way, race, right? There's all of these varying degrees, and within each of these, there's also different levels, right? So you could have a teacher who is, not white, who is still carrying out the roles of what the white supremacy wants by policing their own students, right? So that's what I mean. We all uphold this level of oppression to a varying degree. Now, whiteness within that, again, if you are choosing to leave this all behind, so you're like, fuck that, I'm going to, why I've been doing the What's Your Calling readings, I'm going to quit my job because I don't want to participate in this capitalist system. Oh, I forgot to tell you, these are the class traitors. They are not down here, but they police. These are the actual police. And that's every jurisdiction, right? Well, those are fabric markers, and they look really weird on paper. And that's why we say that pigs are class traitors, because they just serve as like a shield from the ruling class to those of us who make this lifestyle for them possible. Okay? Anyway. So whiteness, I'm in this chat for pro-Palestinian, And someone the other day commented and was talking about how white people need to know their role, and how if you're white, you need to stop trying to take the lead. And I agree. And I've been in that space within the movement of, like I already said, not recognizing how much space I took up as a white person, not in a white space. A lot of white folks have never been the minority in a given space. And that's a good place to start. And when you are the minority, right? So this doesn't work for people who say they're colorblind, because we're not colorblind. And even if you are colorblind, that's only your greens and reds. It's not your browns and blacks, okay? You can still see, okay? It's black and white. Anyway, when you are in an organizing space as a minority, again, whatever that is, if it's your religious beliefs, your skin, your sexuality, whatever you are, if you've never experienced becoming or being a minority, you're gonna need to have some thick skin first and foremost. You're gonna need to take things to heart, but not allow them to destroy you, right? That's why you have to do your inner work. You're gonna need to have a few ego deaths, and you're gonna need to have empathy, and you're gonna need to recognize, wow, if I feel like this in this one moment that I've never experienced in my entire life, being a minority, I cannot imagine how being black or brown within this society, because they're not minority. White people are the minority, but we live within white supremacy. And we talked about this when we did the collective convo about, no, that was a collective coffee, about South Africa. Because now that these white folks who have, done this apartheid in South Africa, and the black folks took their land back and their power back, and they're like, fuck you, get the fuck away from us. You colonized us. That doesn't mean this is yours, right? This is what we're experiencing. So now the United States is like, oh, come over here, baby. We'll take care of you. The United States has taken land from their own people, like farm owners, and they're giving it to these South African people. That's settler colonialism. That's what we're also seeing in Palestine with these Zionists, these crazy motherfuckers. All of them are crazy. But anyway, I want you to understand the relationship of whiteness, right? So when people say, palm-colored people or whitey skin or things like that, you can understand it as a systemic context and not take it personally. And if you're part of the problem, like if you're a fucking Karen out here, then you're gonna take it personally. That's why Karens act the way they do. A lot of Karens are working from a place of like deep ancestral bullshit. Like when those Karens act the way they do out in public, that's like, when I see that happen, I recognize that as deep ancestral shit. I don't talk to my family, so one of my personal stories around whiteness, I will share. My mother's sister, my aunt, they are from the South, okay? I was born in Georgia. My mother was born in Alabama. My family lives in Georgia. So I'm come from a white family, obviously. And when I married my baby daddy, who's black, very black, like darker skin, I wanted to tell my grandma, because we eloped, obviously. We were like, fuck y'all, alright? And yeah, that didn't work out, but it was a great time, okay? At the time. Anyway, I was hellbent on having this conversation with my grandma because I was prepared to. I wanted to show her photos. I wanted to answer her questions. I wanted us to have a really baseline conversation. I was very excited and prepared to talk to my grandmother about it, okay? My grandma wasn't a bad person, but she lived in the South. She had preconceived notions. She had her own ideas of what whiteness was. I had talked to my grandparents. My grandfather had already passed by this time, but, when 9/11 happened and when I, knew it was an inside job, I remember they had this big, 9/11 hardcover book on their coffee table, And I was talking to them about how it was an inside job, right? And I liked having those conversations with my family. That's my role as the curse breaker, as the black sheep in my family, to facilitate conversations that make them question their own reality. And so I was super stoked to talk to my grandma about marrying a black man. And my aunt took that from me. She told him, oh, he's black. And she did it just like that. And that's why I called her a cunt, and that's why they hate me and they took my inheritance. Because she fucked up and never owned up to her own fuck up. She knows what she did was wrong, but they're so racist and they didn't realize it, you know? So I called her. I'm like, you're a racist cunt. And that was like, what? That was almost 10 years ago. We haven't talked. But I was pissed because she took that from me. And then when my grandma saw me, my grandma was just like, oh, you're a big girl. You gained weight. And I'm like, yeah, well, I've got a lot that I've got to be firm in my standing, grandma. Okay? My family was obsessed with being small, and that's why I had an eating disorder for me. Anyway, I'm trailing off. See, that's the whiteness. We center ourselves. I was just using that as an example of what not to do first and foremost, and also how deeply embedded it is within white. No. Culture always comes through, but it's not a culture. It's whiteness. Okay? So again, when you work within movement spaces, do your best not to center yourself. We have to quiet our inner monologues in spaces where we are the minority, and we have to follow the lead. Yes, we can have great ideas. Yes, we can, say something, but we don't need to take over. We need to be very careful about the space we take up, about the ways in which we show up, right? And I think that, I don't think it's always fair either. Fair is objective or subjective. I always get these confused. I think that sometimes white folks do have really good points of view and can share, some inside knowledge from growing up in a white world. And I think sometimes that is taken as, it's not taken as a valid thing. And that can be really frustrating in the movement, but I want to put it here because it's real, it happens. And you have to understand folks who have been on the receiving end of white supremacy for their lives, their ancestors' lives, don't owe you anything as a white person, right? And as white folks, we have to acknowledge when we do too much, when we have a savior complex. We haven't even talked about that. That's a whole nother conversation. I'm gonna run out of time, but we'll do that. I think one of my experiences within my marriage at one point, because he just played the race card constantly. And I was doing my anti-racist work. I was doing my decolonizing work. And it was still not there. I wasn't being met with that around misogyny, right? Like, he still had internalized misogyny. And he still had ideas about, his own bullshit around whiteness. And, it wasn't me. It was projected onto me. And so I think, that's what I'm talking about with the fairness. None of us have to take any of... No, let me rephrase that. None of us are accountable for all of what this system has done. However, we are responsible for what we do, and if you're choosing to break the cycles within your colonial lineage, or heal the trauma within your ancestry that has been affected by colonial lineage, by again decolonizing. It's a whole thing. We all have to decolonize from this. We are all in this together, and we all have our own ways of existing within it, of experiencing it, with interacting with each other. We all have varying degrees of privilege, right? It's more like a bar graph, but like a bar graph within like a spiral. I don't know. I'm getting like right? So, like, we all have varying degrees of participation within oppression, of privilege, of oppression itself, of poverty, of whatever. But, like, none of us have the same. So, I mean, it's just kind of like this acknowledgement of, like, man, I was really a douche at one point. I said some stupid shit. I laughed at these jokes. But I want you to understand, again, it's so deeply ingrained. Why didn't I do a racism chapter in that media class? Damn, hang on. Media and racism. Okay, ideas. I'll add an episode. So, for white folks who are going to be more participating, please understand that black and brown folks are tired of the bullshit. They're tired ancestrally. There's a lot of fear, I think, right now that's being reawoken with good reason. Lots of people are being impacted. And I think utilizing your whiteness to gain access to white spaces is a little more important right now than doing the other, and then reporting back. And I think that's the thing that I was starting to say when I used the word fair, which was not a good word. But I think one thing that I remember about being in frontline work as a minority in these spaces was that my perception and experience growing up in a conservative white family was not validated as useful, which irritated me because we've experienced that oppression firsthand too. Kids of these families, especially those of us who have chosen to cut off our families, telling you why. And a lot of the times people are like, go talk to your family, and we've tried, you know. Whiteness is always going to hold itself up, and white folks are always, I mean, that's what we're experiencing right now, you know. People don't care because they don't want to lose their own privilege. I think that people understand fine what the hierarchy is. They don't want to lose their privilege. I think that's the main point. And that is the problem with whiteness and the proximity to whiteness within white supremacy. So, I hope this helped. I know I rambled a little bit, but I hope this made some light bulbs go off for folks, or if you are in a space of organizing, like on the ground, or participating in actions, or, you know, remembering that we're all problematic, but whiteness within whatever way we've associated with it, especially if you are white, is really harmful, and that's what the system wants. So continue to remember that we have common enemies, okay? And if we can continue to center around common enemies, we're gonna be all right. No matter what happens in an interpersonal setting, communal setting, check yourself, do your work. There's playlists to do so. Daily decolonizing, shadow work, especially around whiteness, cycle breaking. Nova, can you shut the fuck up for a sec? Yes, we know you're here. Yeah, just take accountability for you, and your actions and your lineage. All right, have a good. Oh, and remember that Harry Potter was a movie about revolution. All right, have a good one. Using magic. Okay, bye.